Hello and welcome everybody, this is Roland Hartmann from graphicinmotion.com and it is tutorial time again. In this tutorial we will create this nice space scene that you can see here. We will create an asteroids field, we will create a planet, and we will especially focus on one of the latest features of Stardust, and that is the option of using 3D volumetric slides right inside After Effects, and this is really awesome. Totally cool. You can really create awesome things as you see here. A light that is interacting with 3D elements inside After Effects is pretty cool. So it looks complex and difficult, but actually the setup is quite simple. So let's dive right into After Effects and let's get started. In After Effects, first of all, let's create a new composition. As always, I use the HDTV 1080 preset and make it 10 seconds long. Now I will add a new solid and call this my Stardust layer. And I will apply the Stardust effect to this layer. And I will start to set up my emitter to create the asteroids. So first of all, before I do that, I will add a light to the scene. And the reason why I do that, I will add a parallel light, is that because I want to use my custom view. And I can use this only if some kind of a 3D element is in my scene, and the light is a 3D layer. So now I am already in my custom view and I want to change my emitter. Go to the emitter settings and let's change this from emitter type point to emitter type ring, because we want to emit from a ring. Then I will turn down the speed to 0 for now, and I will expand the size on X to 2500. I also want to rotate this 90 degrees on the x-axis so that it lies flat in my scene. And I want to increase the ring particles to 100. Let's zoom out a bit here, or dolly out, that we can see what's going on. And now you see I created a big ring with 100 particles. One more thing, I want to emit only once, so I do not need to emit all the time. And of course, I want these particles to be visible throughout my whole scene, so I will extend or increase their lifespan to 10 seconds. And okay, now I have a basic ring made out of particles that live 10 seconds in my scene. Awesome. Now I want to create an asteroid field, and therefore I need some distribution here, some kind of a disk. And to achieve that, I will use a replica node. So let's add a replica node and let's link it to my particles. And inside the replica node, let's first of all change the replicates to something like, I don't know, maybe 12 or so. Then I want to change the scale on X to 110. You will see what this does. This will spread out now it will extend my ring on the X-axis. And if I do the same on the Z-axis, then I have a nice evenly distributed disk. Cool, but I don't want this to be evenly distributed. I want it to be randomly distributed, and therefore we will use a turbulence node. So let's add a turbulence node and let's link this to my replica. And now I can offset that position. So let's put in something like, I don't know. Let me quickly take a look at my two horizontal views, and I need here now not the top view, but I want to have one of the side views just to see how far these are distributed. And let's say we take for now not too much, so we'll go with 350 for now, because I will create a second instance afterwards, but this is good for now. Okay, let's go back to my one view, and now I want to add a bit more randomness here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change the size of the particles a bit. So I go to my particle properties and I randomize this size. Let's say maybe something like 80% size variation. Now let's go to our replica node, and here we also have some options to randomize this. In the random properties here, you see we have the replicate chance, and this is also nice. So let's get rid of a few of these, because this also creates randomness. That will help us to create a realistic asteroid field. And again, we can also change the particle size a bit here. I will not go too crazy here, maybe something like around 50%. Okay, until now we only have a flat circular 2D particles, so we have no 3D objects in here yet. But it's time to change that and to replace our particles with 3D models. And therefore I will use assets from the 3D library. So let's open up our preset browser and let's enter the 3D library. If you don't know about the 3D library, then you should check out one of my previous tutorials where I explained a little bit. And this is a selection of 3D objects that you can use inside Stardust, and it ships with the full version of Stardust. So it is not available for a trial version, but if you have a full version, then you can download it right here and install it. Inside this library, you can find a bunch of folders, and we are interested now in the nature folder and here in the rock folder. So let's add a few of these rocks to my scene, and actually I will just take these 3 here. So I will take rock number 7, I will take rock number 8, and I will take the last one here, rock number 9. Okay, and add these to my scene, and now they are all in my scene. So let me just drag these over here that I can rearrange these a bit. So let's put this down here and just rearrange this a bit better. Bring them closer together, because later on I will duplicate all of these nodes, and that's why I will organize these a bit better for now. Okay, and if you take a close look here in the middle of our scene, these 3 models, they are already visible here. But of course, I want to distribute this on my particles. So to do that, first of all, I will link all my model nodes with my particle node. And by default, this will do nothing. And this is because my particle type is still set, or shape is still set to circle. If I change this now to model, you will see we'll get a big mess. And this is because the size of my models is way too big. So let's go to our model node. And let's change the sizes here a bit. So in the first one, I want to change it, let's say, to 3. And the second model, we will set the size to 4, bit of a variation. And the last one, we will set to maybe 7. Let's take a look how this looks like. And now all of my particles look pretty much the same. And this is because by default, Stardust is placing one of these models on each particle, and we do not want this. So go to the particle node, and there is an important setting when you want to distribute 3D objects on your particles, and this is the use models here. If it's set to all, then it does exactly what I just said. So it will just use all of these 3D models on each particle. But if you change this to random, then it will randomly distribute your 3D models that are linked to this node here on your particles. And this is exactly what I want in my case. So you see, it looks quite nice already. Now, let's make this even more interesting. Let's go to the particle node and add a bit of random angles. So just increase the angle random to 100. Now they are all orientated in a different way. And I also want to introduce some animation. So I will introduce a subtle amount of rotation. So let's say speed of 1 on X, maybe 2 on Y, and 1 on the Z axis, and then randomize this speed about 50%. Now they will all spin a little bit. Let's take a quick look here. I don't know whether we can see it from this distance. If I create a run preview here, yeah, you see they're slightly slowly spinning, and that's exactly what I want. Okay, then I also want to introduce some animation here. So I want them to float around a little bit, and I will do that by just animating the fractal speed of my turbulence. So let's go to the turbulence node, and here we have this fractal speed option, and also be very gentle here. So do not push this too far, because otherwise they will fly around like crazy. And I think that 0.5 will be enough here actually. But we will see that when I create a camera in the next step. So now let's create a camera. And in my case, I will create a 24mm, bit of a wide angle camera. And now this is in the middle here of this circle. And actually I want this to be right inside my star field. So I will just, or my asteroid field, so I will just dolly out and take a look here. And you see my particles suddenly disappear. And this is actually because of the clipping settings of Stardust. So if you go to your render settings and if you go to clipping, and you see we have this max distance here. So that means that all the particles that are further away from your camera, and my camera now is my custom view camera, further away than 15,000, they will disappear. So I will just change this for now to 25,000 and 24,000, because then I will see all my particles. And you see what we have got here. It looks pretty cool. So one more thing I want to do to increase the realism of that is inside the replica node, I have the option to turn off the original, let me see how it is called, the original opacity. And that means that the original result of my emitter, which is my ring, I can just turn this off. You see, if I turn this off, it just somehow looks a bit more natural. This is what I want. So I just turn this to 0 and it's good. Okay, so let's take a look where my camera is now. And by the way, before I continue working, you see we have all these OBJs and all the JPEGs that are actually the textures of these rocks here that Stardust added to our scene. I just want to hide these for now because I do not need them now in my timeline. Now with my camera selected, I will position this a bit better. So let's pull it out here on the Z axis, and I will pull it out quite a bit because I want this camera to be in the middle of my asteroid field. All right, like so. Good, probably. Let's see. And now let's create a quick planet here in the middle, and this is pretty simple. Modeling planets is probably the easiest thing in 3D. So let's just grab a model node. Let's select a primitive, and I want to have a sphere, of course, and crank up the size to 2250 or something. And you see now I have a planet. It's probably a bit too big, so let's make it 2000. 2000? No, a bit bigger, 2150. Yeah, okay. And it's a bit jagged here, so it has a few edges, and this is because of the low segment count. So let's just increase this to 96 on X, 96 on Y. Now we get a nice smooth planet here. And now if I change to my active camera, you can already see what this does and what this looks like. So it looks a bit flat, everything, but now the fun part starts, because now we will set up a nice view and then we will introduce the volumetric light. So be a bit patient, a few more minutes, and then it gets really exciting. Okay, I mean, it was really exciting already, but it gets even more exciting. So I will zoom in a bit further with my camera because I want the planet to fill a bit more of my screen here, like so. And now I will dolly over to the side so that we just have this part of my planet here in the scene. That looks good. I will bring it in even further, like so. I want to have a few of these stones or rocks here a bit nearer to my camera. Looks not too bad, but I can change this later on using the seeds. I will show you this in a moment. So now let's give it a bit of rotation here on the Z axis, maybe something like 5 degrees. Yeah, that adds a little bit of drama here. Okay, so let's create a quick round preview just to see what we have got, whether the animation is nice and smooth. Maybe it's just a little bit too slow. I mean, things move slow actually they move pretty fast in space, but they look slow, you know. Let's take a look. No, that's perfectly fine. Really smooth. I like it. Okay, so now let's introduce a volumetric light. Right now I have one parallel light in my scene, but this is just something like a help light, and I do not want to use a parallel light as my volumetric light. One hint right before we get started here, it really makes a difference which kind of light you use. So a parallel light, if you use it as a volumetric, will look different than a point light or than a spotlight. So keep this in mind when you set up volumetric light scenes. In my case, I want to use a spotlight, and I will turn down the cone angle to 20 degrees, and this has a reason, and you will see this in a moment why I do that. I will just now change to my 2 views, and this time I want to have my top view here because I want to place my spotlight here. And I want the spotlight to be in the back of my scene. So it should be right in the middle or on the edge of my asteroid field. I want it to point towards my camera or towards the planet. And I want it to be visible here right on the edge, like that. A little bit like that. And then we just point it a bit more towards my camera. And this also will have an influence, I will show you this in a moment, how my volumetric light will look in the end. So let's point this towards the camera. You see that the camera is right here. Okay, and I will just leave it for now. And now let's make this volumetric. And if you hear a strange noise, it just started raining like crazy here. And it's hammering against my window. Really cool atmosphere. It gets really nice here with volumetric lights and rain and stuff. I like it. Okay, so volumetric light. I just added this node here, and you can just add it to your scene. You do not have to connect it to anything. And by default, it just creates a big mess. Everything is white. And this is because by default, the volumetric light will take all of the lights in your scene into account. And you can specify this with the names of your lights. So if we take a look, my spotlight is called spotlight. And if I choose the option here, starting with, and instead of all I put in an S here, and then Stardust will only take my spotlight into account. I will turn off my parallel light for now because I do not need it. And you see that it's still creating a mess, and this is because our settings are way too high. So let's drop the amount first of all to 10% or 10, whatever this is. And you see now, yes, we get something. It looks like something like a fog with a bright spot, and that's not actually what we want to achieve. So we could go in here now and play around and try around, but there is one crucial thing that you really have to keep in mind when working with volumetric lights. If you want them to interact with your objects, then you have to turn on the shadows in the render settings of Stardust. So let's open up the render settings, and here you will find the shadow tab, and we can turn this on. And then suddenly you get some more exciting and dramatic results. Now you see we have a shadow from our planet, we have shadows already from our asteroids here, and yeah, this looks way better. I think that the position of my light is not perfect. I want it to be a bit back or further back, because now it's not taking all of these asteroids that I have in my scene into account. So I will just move this further back. And you will see the further I move it back, the more drama it will create, because the more stones actually, or asteroids actually really interact with it. So I will move it back quite a bit. So 13,500 is maybe a good value. And this looks really nice already. Move it over here. And you see if I move the light, then it really is interacting, and the beams are interacting with these asteroids. And that's pretty cool. Now let's take a quick look at the settings, and I will not go through all, or probably I will go through all, but I do not want to explain each of it. I just want to set up my light so that it looks nice in this scene. First of all, I want to colorize it a bit. I want to give it a slight bluish tint. Looks pretty nice. Then you have the option to change the distribution, and I'll show you this quickly. Of course, if you increase this, then you create more light in your scene. But I do not need that much, so I will turn this down maybe around 60 for now. I have the option to change the hotspot brightness and hotspot size, but I do not want to do this now. First of all, I want to change the decay. The decay is a pretty cool setting, and there you can change. It's kind of a fall off, the decay, you see. You can make it smaller. Let's put this to 10 just to demonstrate this. Then it's really small. Or you can, of course, increase it, 70. If I go further here, don't know, let's see. Then you create more volumetric light in your scene. And I think that for me, a small amount of decay is nice, something like 20. Let's stay with 20 for now. Then we have the contrast. The contrast also a very interesting setting. So if you turn this down, maybe to 20, then you will get more fog feeling here, and the more you crank it up, the darker your scene will get. So I want it pretty dark, so I will increase it maybe to 75, And that looks quite nice. I still have these foggy elements here, but the overall feeling is a bit darker. Maybe I even increase it to 80. Yeah, I like it a bit better. Then we have the shimmer amount. Shimmer amount, you see we can create this rays here. That's also pretty cool. And I will turn it down a bit. I don't want it too much, so 50, yeah, I'll leave it at 50. And I can change the shimmer scale here. And the further I crank this up, the details, more details you see appear in this shimmer. That's pretty cool. And in my case, I want to make this around 200. Then you can, of course, animate the shimmer, and therefore you can just animate the shimmer phase. It's not really necessary in my case, so I can just leave that as the standard value. Then you can mix the shimmer with the shadows, I think, or with the light as it is. You see, you can increase the shimmer or decrease it. I will just leave that as a standard. And the shimmer world I will also leave at 0. I think this has something to do when you move the light inside 3D space, and then the shimmer world will have an effect on the position change. But in my case, the main thing here will be the shadows that will create this volumetric feeling. Okay, now let's quickly take a look at the hotspot brightness. If I turn this to 0, yeah, then it gets, of course, smaller, and the hotspot size works a little bit the other way around. If you increase this, it gets smaller, and if you decrease this, it gets a bit more obvious. Interesting. So in my case, yeah, I can just leave it, I don't know, hotspot brightness 40, and the size, yeah, it's quite good with 120, maybe 100, like so, maybe 150, not that much of a difference. Okay, let's say that I like that, and I really do. So if you take a close look here, and we are in half resolution only, so let's go to full resolution for a moment. And we have really these really nice beams of light and this fog going on here, and it's really cool. But it would even be better if we have more asteroids in our scene. So let's do that. Let's move our volumetric light out of the way for a moment, and let's just duplicate our whole tree here of my asteroids field. So I select all of my nodes, and I will just press Ctrl D on my keyboard to create a duplicate. And now I have to rearrange this a bit. So let's just drag these down here without creating too much of a mess. I'll just try to keep my hierarchy intact and just separate them. Okay. I didn't get these. Now I have them. Okay, now I have to just connect this again. Okay, and now I want to create a bit of a variation between these. So first of all, inside my second emitter now that I created, I want to change the ring particles to a way higher amount. So let's say 400, and this will fill our scene immediately. That's a bit too much, but we will change this in a moment. So first of all, I want these to be way smaller. So I go to my particle size and change it to 5. I want to have a few more small ones here. That looks better. Now I will go to my replica, and actually I can change this also a bit. So just to put in a bit of variation, let's say that we put in 107 and 107 on Z, and now we have a bit more here. Looks quite good. Now let's go to the turbulence, and let's increase the position offset for these quite a bit maybe, so that they are really filling our scene a bit more. That doesn't look too bad actually. And what we can do now, we can go into our models, and let's see. What I would like to have is a few of them are really big and the other ones are smaller. So let's go to these models of my first system, and let's change the sizes here maybe a bit. So this is set to 3. I will set this down to 2 to decrease the size of these a bit. Then I will go to my second model, and I think that this was at 4. I will set this down to 3. Yes, and then I will just leave these big, and let's take a look here, 7. Maybe I increase this even to 9, that we have a a few really big chunks in here. Yeah, that's cool. And now I will just decrease the size here as well. So let's go into these here. Let's make it 2. And I will increase the size of this second one, maybe to, in this case, whoops, in this case to something like 6. Okay, and right here, and we turn this down to 3. Yes, that doesn't look too bad. Actually, I like it. Yes, looks quite nice. So another option that I have, if you want to art direct how this is distributed, you can do this by the seed values. And you have seed values on your emitters. And if you change the seed here, then you see that you will change the position of the particles actually. This will change this. And you can art direct how these particles are distributed here. And the other option that you can go inside the particle node, and there you also have a seed value, and this shift seed value that you have got here will just change the distribution of the 3D model. So it will not change the position of the particles itself, it will just change which of the models that you connected is distributed on which particle. And this is also pretty cool, because then you can distribute where the big chunks are, or art direct that a little bit. So let's do that here as well. Let's take a look. Oops, now I changed the birth chance. No. Let's take a look here, what we can do here. It looks quite good. Actually, yes, I really like that. So now, one more little thing I want to do. I want to go to my turbulence of my second system, and these are the smaller chunks, and I want these to animate a bit faster. So I will just put this to 1 fractal speed. Okay, this should do. And now, just to make this whole scene a little bit more interesting, we will add 2 more lights to this scene. So let me just take or use my parallel light that I already put in here. And of course I do not want it here. This looks pretty awful. As you see, this destroys everything. So we have to position that a little bit better. So to make this easy, let's create a new null for a moment. Make it 3D, because this will then stay right in the middle of my scene. And I just will use its position to control the point of interest of my light. So let's just link these two together. Alt click on the stopwatch and then just take the pick whip to the position. And this way now I can just use my parallel light way easier. You see now the point of interest will stay always in the middle of my planet. And now I can just shift it around easily and create a nice look. So you see, what I try to achieve here is I want to have a bit of light on my planet here on the side. And I also want to have a bit of light on my asteroids. But I think that this is a bit too much. So let's put this. No, I'm on Y now. I do not want to change the Y axis. I wanted to change the set. So let's push it over again here on X. And then let's pull it back on set a little bit. Not too bad. Let's go in here. Just try to get a small amount of light to the side of my planet, like so. This is okay. It's just too intensive. So let's open up the light options and turn down this intensity quite a bit, maybe to 25. That's cool. A little bit more, 35. Okay, yeah, that looks nice. This is exactly what I'm aiming at, this nice shine here on my planet. Now let's duplicate this light. Let's make this fast now. I will speed this up a little bit now. I'm wasting too much time on lighting, but you see, lighting is crucial for these scenes. So this is really where you should spend time to get this right, because this really creates the look. And now I will just take this, and no, this is too far back. So I will just take this over here. No, actually I have to take it further back. What I want to create with this is a slight shine here on the edge of my planet, as you see now. This looks pretty cool, but I just turned down the intensity here a bit more, maybe 20. And of course I could play with the colors here a bit more, so I could make this more bluish. Let's take a look. One view. Yeah, I think that this looks quite nice. It's really not too bad. Okay, so one thing that I did not do is to add a texture to our planet. I mean, it would not be necessary because it's just a shadow of a planet, but you know, it adds a bit to the scene. So let's add a material and let's link it to our model, which is our planet actually. I didn't rename any of these now, so it's not very organized. And now let's import a texture. So let's go to import file. And I will just choose one of my textures. And I downloaded these textures a few years ago, I think, from NASA. I do not really remember anymore, but this is actually Io. This is one of the moons of Saturn, Jupiter, I don't know. But it's a cool texture. And I just pre-composed this now. And I want to tint it so that it is a black and white texture. Like so. So you can see it, how it's looking. Pretty cool. And I also want to add a bit more contrast. So I will just take curves and color correction and increase the contrast a bit. I actually just, oops, no, I didn't want to change the RGB. I just want to stay on the, yeah, I want to change the RGB, not the colors. So let's just increase the contrast here to make this more dramatic, like so. Looks pretty cool. Okay. Nice. Now let's go to my main comp and let's add this to my scene. Let's drag in our composition, make it invisible. And now inside my material, I can now assign this to different channels. First of all, I want it in my diffuse channel, of course. So let's select diffuse texture, this EU RGB. And let's turn down the color from particle, because otherwise it will have not an effect. And now we should see something, and we see nearly nothing. A little bit, you can see it here. So this is of course because we have not that much light on my planet, and yeah, it's a subtle effect, but it's an effect. So I will also bring it into the roughness here. So let's take this here as well. And yeah, you see, it's a very subtle effect, I have to admit, but yeah. If I increase my light here, I just want to show you this, you know, so that you understand why I'm doing this. If I increase the intensity of my light, now you see we have this texture here on my planet, and yeah, it just looks a little bit nicer than without. Of course, if you want to change the rotation of your planet, you can do that as well. You just go to the model, and inside the model properties, you have this option of the angle. So let's just rotate this maybe a bit on Y until we find a nice spot. And as I said, it's really not that obvious, but there was a nice spot here, this dark one here. And I actually like that, and you see it here as well. Here's also something going on. Let's concentrate maybe a bit more on this area here. Okay. Good, so you see it's a bit of a subtle effect, but we can increase it, and I will do that actually. I will just add one more light, and I want to add a very, very, very subtle ambient light. So let's add an ambient light, and let's turn this down to a value maybe of 3%, and let's take a look what this does. This will just brighten up the whole scene, and now you see also the texture of my planet is more obvious, and yeah, this is really cool. I like that. Okay, you see that I'm spending a lot of time lighting, but you see that it's important. I would recommend that you spend way more time than I do here. Generally, always. All my tutorials, what I do, don't do the same. Spend more time. Then you get way cooler results. Okay, so as a last step in this tutorial, I will just add a quick color correction so that we have something that you can really look at, you know. So let's create a new adjustment layer. And let's add a Lumetri color. It's a good idea, actually. Lumetri. If you have one of the newer versions, then you will have Lumetri color. If you're working with CS5, then, well, then Stardust doesn't work anyway. So let's go to the creative here and let's add maybe, oh, this sounds nice, Matrix Mars. So I should take this. Let's see what this does. Not too bad, but I don't like it. So let's take a look at this Matrix Green. Wow, that's like underwater. Matrix Blue. And now I will spend about 1.5 hours going through all these, searching for a nice preset, and you can watch, so stay tuned. No, of course I won't do that. I will just take the Matrix Mars and I will be satisfied for now. I will turn down the intensity a bit, so maybe to something like 70. And then I will change the basic color correction. So let's increase the exposure slightly to 0.5 or something. Yes or no, I don't know. Bit more shadows, maybe 25, or more brightness in the shadows, I should say. So reduce the exposure again. I don't need this. Something like that, you see. And yeah, not quite satisfied, but for the sake of this tutorial, it's okay. So if you want to spend a bit more time, then you can do so. I want to give you now one more hint to make this a bit more interesting. There is another feature that is pretty cool inside Stardust, and it's also new. So let's take a look at that. And this is the fog feature. If we turn this on now, by default, it will get a little bit crazy again. You see what it does? It just overlays your 3D elements with a color that you can select, and you can and yeah, it of course overlaying it along the Z axis. You can specify start and an end, and I want to increase this start so that we do not get too much on our planet, but I will show you what you can do with this, and this is pretty cool. We can create a bit more foggish environment here. And now we will just take a color, and we will take a color right something about here. Let's take a look. Like so. You see what we got now. And I think this is not too bad. It's quite cool, actually. We can turn down the opacity so that it's a bit more subtle. But you see where this is going. Maybe I make it a bit darker, actually. One of the darker areas. Yeah, and I think I like that. It's not that bad. So if we turn this off now, you see that we have a bit of a fog going on here in my asteroid belt, and I really like this effect. Okay, so as a last step, I will add, first of all, I will just bring in the start of my work area to frame number 1, because on frame number 0 we have no particles. Now I will create a quick animation, a very quick animation, just 5 seconds, just a short piece, because I want to do a quick run preview in the end. Let's separate the dimensions here. I only want to move it on X. That makes it easier. X position keyframe. At least I do one thing fast in this tutorial. This is creating an animation. So let's now move this behind our planet a bit further, like so. And as a really last step, and I think I said this now already for I don't know how many times, but this is really crucial, I will put in a backplate here. So let's just import a nice texture, and I downloaded this also from the internet, so just some kind of a space texture, and put it in here, make it 3D, make sure that it doesn't accept any lights, so turn this off, accept lights, position it way back, 25,000 is good, scale it up, hold down shift and scale it up so that it covers more or less my scene. I will rotate it because I also tilted my camera 5 degrees, so then it will just fill in my scene a bit better. And then I will shift it over so that we have a nice, take a look at that. That looks quite cool. And this is important, you know, to get another layer of realism here. I think it's way too opaque, so we'll just turn down the opacity to something like 60. Okay, yeah, you see now this looks really nice. So adding this makes total sense, definitely. So now, as a really final step of this tutorial, I promise, I will do a quick run preview and I will be back when it's finished. Okay, now the RAM preview is finished and I'm looking at the result and I think that it's pretty cool. Maybe the movements are a little bit too erratic of the small stones, but yeah, otherwise everything looks really nice. So I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial a bit, that I maybe sparked some ideas in your mind. If you liked it, then please give me a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions, then feel free to post them in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I really hope to see you soon. Goodbye.